I set a goal for myself and I'm nowhere near that. Mr. Rochester. I'm gonna say his name like that all the time for all of eternity. Hi, hello, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to the Jess Chronicles. My name is Jess. Thank you so much for being here today. We're kind of halfway through the year. I thought I would just make a quick video kind of recapping my favorite books that I've read so far in 2023. Here we go. I don't want to blab on too much about these books. Some of them I have already mentioned before in other videos. One of the very first books that I read this year was Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. Sometimes I like to call it Tomorrow times 3, so I just feel like that's easier to say than Tomorrow, Tomorrow, Tomorrow. This book just, oof. I remember opening it and just reading the first couple sentences. I had this feeling, you know that feeling you get when you know a book is just gonna be absolutely fantastic. That's that feeling I got. Wow, Gabrielle Zevin's writing is truly gorgeous. The way that she tells the story and the plot, just it all unravels so smoothly. This is a coming of age story about two kids who meet and eventually become really, really great friends, Sam and Sadie. And then the other important main character, part of this best friend group, his name is Marks. Sam and Sadie, they decide to create a video game together, and Marks eventually helps out with this whole process too. It's really just a story about friendship, ambition, you know, having this big dream, this big thing that you want to work towards and achieve. It's about tenacity, just having passion for creating art. It's the story of them creating this game together and all the ups and downs, all the different relationships in between that they have, the hardships that they go through. It's just a really, really powerful story. One of the main themes in this book is the ability to start over again, start a new life, kind of like you can in a video game. I thought the ending of this book was absolutely spectacular. Like, it could not have ended in a better way. It did take me a little longer to get through. It's just the plot is very thick. There's so much happening all the time. It was a little harder to dig through. It's absolutely gorgeous. You should read it if you haven't. Next on the list of best books of 2023 so far, Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This book is described as high fantasy with low stakes, and that's exactly what it is. Nothing crazy or dramatic happens in the story. There's not a whole lot of tension or conflict, and sometimes that's so nice. This was just so nice to cuddle up with a cup of coffee. Such a heartwarming and kind story. There are big themes of community and being compassionate toward people. Our main character is Viv, and she's an orc, which is kind of like a goblin type creature in the fantasy world. In these big fantasy novels, there's always this big epic battle at the end. So she was fighting all these different battles in the land that she came from, and so she decided one day that she wanted to kind of retire from all that and live a sweet little slow-paced life. So she decided to open up a coffee shop in a brand new town that she's never been to. She meets all these other creatures and friends that help her put together the coffee shop. There is a giant werecat. It's like big and fluffy. Also, none of these little creatures in this town have ever had coffee or experienced it, so that was a really fun part of it too. There's a little bit of conflict in this story, a little teeny tiny bit. There is kind of an evil character that's lurking around. Viv has this magical stone that this other evil creature wants to get from her, so there's a little bit of tension there. That's about it. Other than that, it's just so happy and cozy and sweet. It made me feel calm. Can't wait for the second book to come out, Bookshots and Bone Dust. I'll definitely be reading that too. Comfy, cozy vibes. If you want a fantasy book, but you just want to feel calm and relaxed and maybe skip over all the fighting stuff, this book is for you. Next up on my list is City of Thieves by David Benioff. This is a historical fiction book. It's actually a pretty quick read. And so the story takes place during World War II, during the siege of Leningrad in Russia. The Germans are invading Russia at the beginning of this book. There is a German soldier who dies that Lev comes across, and he gets imprisoned for stealing from this man. And there's this other young man named Kolya who is also imprisoned. So they speak with the colonel. He kind of makes a solution for them to be freed. And that solution is to go out into the city and find a dozen eggs to bake a cake for his daughter's wedding. So I just thought that was such an interesting premise. This is definitely an adventure story. Like right off the bat, you're taken on this journey with Lev, going out and trying to find all these eggs for this cake. There are so many different twists and turns and other characters that they meet along the way. This book was just so engaging. At the end of every chapter, it just really felt like it was leading right into the next one. The way that the story is set up is really cool too, because at the very beginning of the story, you learn that Lev is now an old man. He's recalling these memories and telling his grandson this grand adventure. The ending of this story is so good. It ended perfectly. I don't read a whole lot of historical fiction, but anytime there's a story about a main character having to go on a quest, it usually pulls me in. This book was just fantastic. David Benioff is actually the co-creator of the show Game of Thrones, so I thought that was very interesting, and it really made sense that the story was just packed with adventure. Next up, I have Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. So this story is about Elizabeth Zott, and she is a chemist. She falls in love with this other chemist named Calvin, and they end up having a baby together, but she's not married. And this is also set in, I believe, the late 50s or early 60s. So the research institute that she works at as a chemist, they do not like that she has had a baby and she's not married. So she loses her job. She then gets hired to be on a cooking show. Throughout the story and through her time on this cooking show, she really is just a great example for women on how they can stick up for themselves, how they can be their authentic selves. It's really just about her making this statement about you can be whatever kind of woman you want to be. You don't have to live by these societal rules and standards and gender roles. She's a very real character. She's very outspoken, she's very bold, she's very courageous, but it's also about found family. There's a lot of those elements in this story. I'm not going to give anything away, but there is also a little bit of a mystery, and that has to do with Calvin and his parents and his background. One thing I really enjoyed about this book was I didn't know where it was going to go next. It was pretty unpredictable. Some things like really surprised me. The ending was really beautiful. There's this big speech moment that she has. This is a really great story. Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. And also has really cool blue pages. I got the Barnes & Noble special edition. Next up on my list, I have Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, and this is one of my favorite books of all time, not just 2023. I fell in love with this book. Just like Jane was slowly starting to fall from Mr. Rochester, I was falling for this book. The writing is absolutely beautiful. It is long, it is a little tough to get through because the language is very fancy and flowery and very eloquent, but it is gorgeous. And there are also so many parts of this book, even though this is set in the Victorian era, I just found myself so many times stopping and realizing that I related to Jane and the things that she was saying. It just felt really still true to today. This book is a lot of different things. This is romance. It's a gothic romance. It kind of has like a creepy, dark, kind of gloomy cast over it. It's a bit of a mystery, but most of all, this is a coming of age story, and this is Jane's story of following her heart and following her passion and achieving her dreams. This story is basically just all about Jane's life and all the hardships that she had to overcome to find her happiness in her own way. So many beautiful quotes in this book. I marked off a lot of different things that I liked. So Jane is an orphan, and she is living with one of her aunts and her cousins. They really don't treat her very well. That's kind of a big theme throughout this book. The people that are around her really don't treat her well, but she knows deep down that she deserves more, she deserves better. So yeah, it starts with her as a child, and then later on she ends up attending this all-girls boarding school. She later becomes a teacher at the school, and she really loves teaching. So after she leaves the boarding school, she gets a job as a governess for little Adele, and she is the ward of Mr. Rochester. So she's staying to care for Adele and eventually falls in love with Mr. Rochester. And I'm gonna say his name like that all the time for all of eternity. It is a love story, but like I said, it's so much more than that. What a great classic. I feel like I'll end up reading this again at some point. That's that. Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. Next up on my list is Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. This is a story about a woman named Tova, and she recently lost both her husband and her son. So she's really having a hard time, and she's grieving that loss. And so she gets a maintenance job at this big aquarium, and she eventually starts to form this friendship with a giant Pacific octopus. His name is Marcellus. It's just a very, very sweet story. That was definitely part of the pull for me to want to read this book, was that it was based mainly around a sea creature. They form this really sweet friendship, and her friendship with this octopus and also this other young man that she meets in the story, she gets some answers to some questions from her past. She kind of unravels a bit of a mystery about her family. I'm not gonna say anything about that because I don't want to give away any spoilers, but it's a really, really beautiful story. And again, another theme of found family, starting over again after a very, very tough loss. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. We love Marcellus the octopus. The last book on my list for today is Writers and Lovers by Lily King. I actually already read this one before, back in 2021. So this is a literary fiction story, and it's about a young girl named Casey. She has recently lost her mother, and this is really just a story about her navigating her life without her mom. She also doesn't have a great relationship with her dad, so it's a lot about navigating all those different family relationships, and it's about her finding herself and making her way in the world. Casey is a writer. Throughout this book, she's trying to write a book of her own, so it's a lot about that process. It's also about her love life. So there are kind of two different love interests in this story. She's just trying to figure it all out. It's just her journey through finding herself and finding her happiness, pursuing the thing that she loves too. There's not much to it other than that. I feel like the plot line is pretty simple, but the writing is beautiful. I also read that there are a lot of themes of the game of chess incorporated into the story, which I thought was really cool. And it kind of makes sense. Like, Casey is really just trying to strategize and figure out her next move. I thought that was really interesting. That's that. Those are, so far, in my opinion, the best books that I have read this year. I'm making a vlog right now, kind of a mid-year freakout vlog where I try to get caught up on my reading goal because I'm very behind. I set a goal for myself to finish 70 books this year, and I'm nowhere near that. So look out for a vlog coming soon of me chaotically trying to get to my goal. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this list of books and maybe you got some good recommendations for your next read. That's it for me today. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!